Welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. It's going to be a wild ride.
Right, this is another episode of Counterpoints. Our guest for this one is Janko, and the topic is a really interesting one actually, because Janko and Moses are going to explain why they both failed as coaches and could never actually do anything. And I'm going to actually admit that I was a fraud, and I didn't call them out for all these years, you know.
Jason is still failing. I'm done.
Right,
Jason's
okay.
in the process, you know.
You've got to be accurate. Exactly,
actively failing.
Yeah.
By the way, I made that as a joke, obviously, but I actually want to ask you something about that, Moses, particularly, because I don't know if you know this, but because everyone who doesn't like me and Richard always has to have some, like, weird angle, and if you notice, the angle always goes like this, that we're, like, liars and corrupt, because obviously it's, like, our whole identity is based on the idea that we're not those things, right? The main angle they take now that Janko's retired, I thought I was getting a break from this Janko. Now that Janko's retired, I don't anymore get people 24/7, like, call him out, why aren't you saying he's shit? You're not saying he's shit because you used to like him, he's your friend, like... All right, so now you're the new one, Moses. Now 24/7, it's like if this was someone else, you'd have destroyed him by now. It's like, what am I supposed to do, Moses? What do I do on this point in time?
Yeah, exercise restraint. Just keep it in, keep it bottled in. I know you have it in you. Dude, I don't know. Do whatever you want. Be honest about it. I told Richard the same thing as well. But maybe pull a couple punches there right at the end. The big ones.
The thing is,
glance those off to the side.
Here's the thing. I definitely obviously will give real criticism, but I also think the one with you is mad, Moses, because what's mad is I actually think Janko has fucking set you up properly, because since he had years where they were saying that, haven't you only been a coach like 4 months of play or something, man? Because after the player break, it's like, wasn't it like 4 months? Like, dude, they want you fired already. It's 4 months.
Yeah, well, actually,
I didn't know they wanted him fired either.
They do, dude. Some people want Moses fired because their new lot. Here's this is why I also told Moses. By the way, you're both in the same boat there, so maybe we can talk about that actually briefly. Is that because you both took like nightmare mode fucking coaching jobs? Like Moses' problem is he took a gig where eventually one day you have to go. Right, actually, don't fire me. Just kick twists, like, the most talented player to ever come from the region. You can't win in that scenario because, like, they won't let you kick anyone basically from teams like that. Like teams like FaZe, like teams like Team Liquid, every player's supposed to be super sick, aren't they? So unfortunately, it means that naturally the coach is going to get the blame because no fan knows what you do, right?
Yeah, there's obviously some truth to that. I think I guess, I don't know. Again, I've only been doing this for 4 months, but or 5 months now. But yeah, you always kind of are the first point because you are the most expendable, and that's just the way it is. I'll be honest though, I actually haven't even noticed any criticism just because when I first took the job and probably had my first round of criticism come my way, I literally just completely have taken a step back from like Reddit, taken a step back from all social media.
Good.
More so than I did when I was a commentator. After like one disappointing loss and reading the comments, I was like, all right, this obviously isn't going to work long term. So I'm just even more disconnected than I ever have in the past. So I don't even notice that shit, to be honest with you.
How about this? How about in the early segments, since we're on this topic anyway? Let's actually make this a little topic. Let's talk about some things, for example, what is it like to coach? What's different? What are the challenges that you could never know if you were just someone in the analysis world? Because obviously one of the things we do, me on talk shows, or you if you're doing a broadcast, we have to critique coaches sometimes. Sometimes we give them praise. Like for example, right now we're all giving Extaz loads of praise from Vitality, but then at the same time we're trashing someone else, and we don't really know what either of these groups of people do. Like in that case, that guy doesn't do content in English. I've never actually been able to have a conversation with him. So, like Janko, on your side, obviously you did it for a few years. What are the most different things about actually being a coach than what you imagine it's going to be like when you take the gigs?
Well, I think the biggest difference is like you're definitely not aware with how much player management you need to do and just like deal with the most basic stuff, like making sure everyone is on time, making sure if you tell people to do something that they actually go and do it, and check up on them if they're like doing the things you gave them, like whether it's whether you want to call it homework or some extra stuff they need to work on, or just given some tasks before a game. If you go through your opponent before the game, right, like the anti-stratting or whatever, that they're actually paying attention and then seeing those things in the game. So, and I knew that, for example, I didn't have any illusions that I was going to come in and work on strats and tactics and and stuff like that, and that's going to be it. I knew the big part of it is management and creating a good atmosphere within the team and all of that stuff. But you are surprised by at the end of the day, these guys are getting paid a lot of money and they're professionals that they've been around for a long time. So some of that babysitting stuff, like the amount of it which I personally had to do, was like definitely surprising, because I think fans on the outside probably think, oh, these guys are pros. There's no way someone can oversleep 3 times in 1 week for practice or something like that. But or have like a terrible sleeping schedule, or not have their priorities in place when it comes to their approach to the game and stuff like that. So yeah, I think for me that was the biggest shock of all.
What about you, Jason?
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty accurate. Especially, I mean, Janko didn't have this. This is one of the areas where I think I got a little bit fortunate with the organization side, where I came into a team that has an analyst on the side that helps. Nice. I have, and I have we have a sports psychologist on staff here. Ooh. So a lot of it is just like, I know it's fancy.
Tell me more, Jason. Keep going.
It's not just like managing like the players, which is its own thing, but also you're also like managing, what does an analyst bring to the table, and then how can I transfer the information that he brings over to the players for the match? How can I learn to read when someone might be beneficial for them to sit down with the sports psychologist? And at least Liquid has given me all these tools, and a lot of it is like learning how to manage, the different tools around me to get like the most effective use out of all of them. And that was probably the area where I struggled the most, not having any like real management experience. I've never had like a team of like 3 people that I've been able to turn to and say, I need you to do this, this, and this. So marshaling those resources is a unique challenge. I don't know, in terms of the other stuff, it's I think there's just like a lot of, especially during COVID, like it's weird because I think I've gotten away with a few things, like the babysitting issue. I haven't had to worry about so much. Like it's still there, but
just because you're in person, you mean? Or
yeah,
once because you're not the land.
Once we get into the person, we're at the facility, and it's also during COVID, so we're quarantined. We can't like go anywhere.
Right.
So I mean, our apartments are on like floor 3, and on floor 2 is the training facility. So we walk downstairs, and we have a cafeteria, and we have a scrim room, and we have all these different things. So it's pretty easy in being self-contained. I haven't had to do anything like at an event quite yet. So I mean, that's I don't know. The other part is juggling all the different. Again, this is something that Janko probably had to deal with just a little bit, but the COVID situation and juggling all the different random distractions and obstacles that pop up. Like one day really wanting to work with the team and then having to sit in, an hour or 2 hours of calls about, travel regulations and visa requirements and documentation and stuff. So, dealing with that kind of stuff is its own little thing as well. But yeah, overall it's been cool. It's just, there's a lot of just odd challenges that pop up here and there.
Actually, along those lines, one thing I wanted to ask both of you, since you both did coach during the era where we just had to only play online, and obviously we know the tournament schedule for teams like the ones that you guys work with was ram-packed the whole time. Was it the case, Moses? Like, did the online era play even more into the complaints you've often voiced about, like, oversaturation on LAN? Because you were one of the people that always made the point. The reason why you didn't want the same teams to meet continuously is so that, you had, like, time to evolve since then, like, go home and boot camp and practice. Like, online, I got the sense that it was even more ridiculous because, like, put it this way, even though I don't want it as extreme as this, one thing I've always liked about games like League of Legends, for example, is if you go, especially in Korea, they used to, back in the day, give you like a week to prep for your playoff match. And in a week, you would really sometimes get like an underdog could sometimes make like, exactly the right like miracle strategy or come up with some genius concept. But the point is you're probably not going to do that in like half a day and especially if you play a match at like, like 10 and the next match is 2 p.m. the next day. Like, I don't even know what you'd scout then. What demos for the next game? Like demos for your own team? What do you do in that amount of time? Like, what's your thoughts on that, Moses?
I mean, first of all, I think it would be, I've always wanted, because I think it'd be cool just to, like, I would love to just have like 6 months, I guess, to try it, is like have an actual schedule where you knew an opponent like 3-4 days in advance and you could actually prepare an entire game plan for an opponent. I would love to see how that could evolve, professional Counter-Strike. It's kind of a pipe dream. It'll obviously not happen anytime soon that we'd be able to have any kind of schedule like that. I mean, I don't know. The online era was its own like unique situation too, because there's oversaturation, and especially in North America, people, talk about the practice partners that we have, but that was never like the biggest issue to me. It did come down to the fact that, every tournament was kind of like this grueling battle between, or not grueling, but, Furia, EG, and Liquid were usually fighting 100 Thieves up there a couple of times. And obviously when we started to struggle towards the end of the online time in North America, some other teams popped up and upset us, but it just gets like monotonous because like no no event feels any different. It's all like an online best of 3 against the same teams that you just played in the last one. North America had its pool of like 6 teams that you could pick from, and those were the 6 teams that were going to be at every single event. And I think, the problem with online in Europe isn't necessarily the same, but you at least get some difference of opponents coming in from like the random CIS teams that are crazy good online that can qualify for an event out of nowhere. So they at least had a little bit of variety and more variety in practice partners to mix things up. But for us, it was like, man, there were just 4 teams repeatedly. So I think the real challenge for me in the online era was when I first joined as a coach, we had like 3 events back to back. So I think we only had like 2 days off from officials or something like that in the first 2 to 3 weeks that I was there, or during like one of the early stretches. And that becomes like a challenge of how much do you want to work on changing things when you have this kind of crazy match schedule, or do you just focus on preparing for your opponents instead of working on fixing some of the issues that you need to fix, but you just don't feel there's time because you have a match the next day. And that was the hardest thing for me to juggle when I first started.
What would you say, Janko?
Yeah, I think for the online part, it's just, I think the big problem was, I remember talking about this before, is all the tournament organizers started changing their formats. So it included round robin best of 3s, then, I'm just waiting for a triple elimination bracket or something like that, best of 5s all the way, why not, right? So that becomes the problem. I think it was Pro League or some tournament like that where we played 10 best of 3s in 11 days. It's crazy, especially during COVID, in Belgrade, where it wasn't just me, it was Nico and Cole living here as well. You had like strict quarantine measures. So it was like after 5 p.m. you couldn't, like curfew, you couldn't leave your apartment, right? So you can't even do something to chill out, go out for a walk, anything like that. So it was definitely challenging, and also just working online. I think you and me talked about this in the Reflections interview. It's like a lot of players would just retire if this was how the scene looked like. It's just not fun to sit in your own room by yourself, and just grind every day a different official and all of that stuff. And it was unfortunate in our case that we just weren't able to do a boot camp at all. Like last time I saw my players all together was in Katowice still, and I even left the team
wild.
In the meanwhile, right? Like I left the team without actually like being there with them and getting everyone together and just having a proper meeting, right? So it's just crazy, and we see teams doing it more and more. Like even back then, like in the first half of the year, teams doing it, and it's just the feeling of fist bumping someone, being loud. I mean, MIBR is probably the the opposite part of the scale when you see them how crazy they get when they play, but it definitely helps compared to some other team where players are just on their own in a room and just playing together. You just don't have that feeling, like Jason said. We're playing Cologne online, which is when things are normal, the craziest event of the year, and you're like trying to get yourself hyped and motivated, but it's really hard because the environment is completely the same compared to Pro League that's after that, the summit that was before that. For you nothing changes, so that was definitely a big challenge.
I think that's actually just one other weird thing that happened to me as well with coaching, and it speaks to that too, is like I did like 2 to 3 months of online coaching when I started, and then once we got the team finally together, it's like a completely different team when you get like all 5-6 players together at the facility or at a tournament or in any kind of environment than it is when they're all split up in their homes across the countries or across Europe or across North America. So for me, it was like I had like I started coaching twice. Like I had the coaching of the online, and then you get to the boot camp, and I'm like, holy shit, the interactions between players are completely different. There are certain like issues or problems that like disappeared and faded away, and then there's certain new ones that popped up. So it was like starting all over again.
People are actually engaged in the conversation and contributing to the conversations that you have.
Sure. I mean, I could totally imagine, by the way, why that would even be an issue, because I know a lot of the pro players, even from like just my own experiences with them. Dude, there's so many pro players where if you put them, like Janko's saying, at a massive event, like could be a major, Cologne, Katowice, you put them at that event and you put them in a real match and then eliminate them, say, like round of 8, like 9th to 12th. They'll all tell you all that's like, all of a sudden, the most lazy, like procrastinating guy, because like gives you the talk as though he's going to be like Tom Brady, like, oh, when I get home, like let's practice, like let's beat these guys next time. You're probably not going to get any any of that online if that guy's like that. Like, surely he's just waiting basically for Lance to... It's actually one of the reasons I feel bad for you, actually, Moses, that you've only coached in the online period, because I'm sure when you imagine taking a gig like that in the past, you want to be walking out with them on the stage and you want to talk to them before an epic match and give them some of your experiences. You don't really get to do as much of that if it's online, really.
I'll send you a couple of good coach quotes, Jason, for that.
Sure.
Perfect. Gonna need those. Yeah, I mean, obviously you do, but I also, when I took this job, I kind of, when we were having the conversations, I figured I could think about it two different ways. I could think about the online era and be like, shit, this kind of sucks that I'm going to start this coaching and not be able to go to these big events. Or I could look at it and say, all right, we have this online era that, who knows when it's going to end, but let's say it ends 6 months down the road, that I have 6 months during this online era to really start to understand the ins and out of the job and what it takes and what the team needs and where I can fit in. And then, once Lance start to come back, you can be off and running. Like, it would be,
yes.
I don't know if it'd be harder, but it would certainly be completely different and probably way more intense and way more pressure if I'm, figuring out how to coach on the Lanxess stage in front of 14,000 people.
Yes.
Versus playing the ESL One Cologne online rescheduled tournament because of COVID. So in that sense, I think it's probably a little bit more forgiving, but certainly there's going to be different challenges as well.
Sure.
It's also a great chance to experiment with a bunch of stuff. I mean, would Vitality really switch players in the middle of a best-of-5 grand final? If it were in front of 10,000 people or just a huge LAN event. So for those things like the roster moves, but also for your team in terms of strategies, like it's a chance to just build up your playbook and test a bunch of stuff, because, well, in a way you have to. You play so many games that you need to refresh your playbook. You need to try different things, and then you just keep track of what worked, what didn't work, and once you go to LAN, you can kind of have your best strategies already there, because they're already tried and tested if the meta didn't change too much. And given that you have experienced players, right, who are not going to necessarily underperform on LAN by a lot, then you as Jason said, you set yourself up in a good position for success when things go back to normal.
Sure. I actually think that's a good mentality to have, Moses, because basically it's kind of like what I always tell people if they're like beginning content creators, which is like, the people where like their third ever thing they've written, they want to send you and get feedback. It's like, no, go and make like all your mistakes now before any of us know who you are. And then if the first piece I ever actually read of yours, like publicly, is let's say like 20 articles in, and now you actually got some skills, like now that's how you build a reputation, like by actually, like you say, like hit the ground running in that sense. Don't try and go at the top while you're still learning the very basics. You've just transitioned. By the way, one thing I thought we could talk about. Oh, go ahead, Janko.
Yeah, just one thing. Like the problem with what I just said is, like, you are still competing all the time.
Sure.
It definitely sucks to lose. So while you're trying to stay positive and do all this stuff, like it can certainly take a toll, not just on yourself, but on the players as well, on the team. You might be making changes. Look at Mousesports, right? They removed Voxic when he was their best player on LAN and the difference maker, right? So you're kind of also forced to make some changes, which in normal circumstances you probably would never have to do. So yeah, in a dream world, you just always look at the positives and, at least you're building your game and working on stuff. But in reality, it's like, it can be a bit different.
One topic I thought we could talk about is obviously everyone in every single show has talked to death the whole like coaching bug exploit angle, but there's actually like sort of a correlated topic, which is first of all, the stream sniping issue, which came up because they didn't name and shame everyone. Like people might know from I can't remember if it was Richard or DK who reported this, but basically I think it was a DK. I remember that when they reported it, essentially there were so many people had done the stream sniping that no joke, they actually did like that conspiracy theory people like Starix gave about Flusher cheating or whatever. Like Valve just told the pros like you got your one chance now, go straight. Like dude, it was basically like that. They went to a whole bunch of these coaches apparently and just told them, we know you did it, but don't ever fucking do it again. And, let's just like not ban half the fucking top 10, right? Janko, you were a guy who on the coaching bug angle was very vocal. Like you were one of the people who basically implied that like you never did it. And as a result, you were like disgusted at some of the people who not only did it, but were trying to sort of downplay it or act like, oh, is it such a big deal? Or, you saw those people like fucking Honda and raging. Like, mate, any of those guys pop their fucking head up for another year, I'm going to smash it back off again. I don't want to hear anything from those guys about their morals of other people, who did something wrong. wrong, what they think should be fixed. Like, you're in prison now, motherfucker. Shut the fuck up. Like, you don't get to have an opinion on that in this moment. So I know you feel strongly about it. What do you think about the whole stream sniping issue, though? Because that's one where it's like, it's not quite as bad as the outright cheating, but it's clearly there's something wrong about it, and we have to find some system to mitigate it to some degree, right? Like, the current system we used to have of like a 30-second or like a minute or 2-minute delay isn't enough. Like, we know that could just be like the round before. If you have, famously, the example is the tech timeout that gives you a little bit extra time so you can check what they did last round. What do you think on this topic? Like, how serious is it?
Yeah, I think still it's pretty serious. Like, cheating in any capacity obviously should be punished. But I do feel like you did. I feel like it's not as, a big of an advantage as, for example, the bug was. And for me, the fix is pretty simple, even though a lot of people will disagree with it, and it's not probably the most convenient one. Just up the delay. You put the delay up 4 minutes or 5 minutes, and the information you can get from stream sniping on some level could still be helpful, maybe, right? Like, let's say you're watching the stream and you see some reaction that your opponents made, and then if you even though it was 3 rounds ago, you didn't try a similar thing, and if you try it, it's going to be the same reaction, like something wild like that. But you already see, like, you need to notice so much and think about it so much. For me, it's as simple as, well, then I'm not focusing on the live play, right?
Yes.
And I'm hurting my team in a sense of that, I'm not helping them by maybe communicating for someone, or making a call for the next round, or just paying attention, right, like to what's going on, giving some suggestions, some ideas, something like that. So I really think that for me the fix is as simple as that. And I think I brought this up with admins, and I think with some of the tournament organizers, not all of them, that why are you not upping this delay? Because it really is ridiculous. Like, if a round lasts long enough, a person could see the beginning of the round before the bomb actually explodes, right? Like, if you plant the bomb and it goes all the way, and which I think is like completely ridiculous. And at that point, it's a huge problem. You can keep track of the money that way all the time, and so forth. So I think that was like all that needed to be done, and there would be no dramas about it. And I think it's very difficult, because you would have even a lot of players, I can guarantee you, they would, halftime comes, they turn up the stream because they want to see the last round, like if a guy, lost a clutch and he wants to see how many HP he had, or wants to see the position where he thought someone was, because he thinks is in his head, this is harmless, I'm just going to check something that's already over. But if you're going through the motions of like seeing who did what, then you could probably point to that player and say, oh, he maybe cheated, right? So, like that's why I think for some of the stuff, it's like, it's way more delicate, I feel like, than just, oh yeah, this guy used this bug, and we have, black and white how he used it, and that he could gain a competitive advantage, and that's it.
What do you think, Moses?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the coach bug was its own crazy animal. Yeah, the stream sniping is another just really weird. I don't know. I think I'm most caught off guard by how many people are actually doing it. It's not like who is some of the thing. Like, I never thought I would have seen Hunden, but to have like 27 or 30, like that's so many people are just cheating. I've never really understand that.
It was even the same thing with the stream sniping, by the way. When I actually spoke privately to some people who did it, by the way, their excuse was, well, everyone else does it. And I was like, you're probably fucking right in the online era. Like, if the screen's off out of camera sight for that webcam of the, I'm sure loads of people do it, sadly.
I mean, I was even hearing rumors of it going on when I was still casting. But I mean, there's not much you can do. You can like pass on, again, rumors, but you don't want to go in like accusing someone just because you heard someone talking about it. You don't, it's hard to get anything official underway just from hearing this in like some casual conversation. But I don't know. I know, listen, like, it's obviously bad. I'm with Yanko. I don't necessarily think the stream sniping was like any huge game-changing, cheat especially the way that coach bug was. But I mean, it certainly is a massive issue, and just from the erosion of confidence and integrity in the professional scene, you can't be allowing it to happen. That's probably the bigger issue than anything. I will say, and like some positive light is, ever since this stuff has come out and we've realized that there's just so many more scumbags than we actually thought there were in the Counter-Strike scene. I think delays, Yanko, have been increased. I think they're at like 5 minutes right now, I believe. As someone who has spoiled, I think, 2 games since my coaching career began, I'm pretty sure that delay has been up. But also, like, the crazy lengths we have to go to. Like, when I do when I played in the Global Challenge and when we play in Blast, every player has a webcam going on. I have a webcam going on at my coach computer, even though I'm not at it. I also have the Faceit anti-cheat running for, I believe, Blast, and obviously ESEA anti-cheat for the Global Challenge. For Blast, for Blast and ESEA, I have to run like a third-party program that gives them like access to like screenshots that my computer is taking. At random.
Holy shit, we're back to like Punk Buster or whatever that shit was back in the day, was it?
Dude, I know, but they've gone so old school. There's so many layers now.
Yeah, it's true.
I literally have 2 anti-cheats running, a third-party program, a webcam on the chair so they can see whenever I'm at the PC. If I'm in the game, I have to record a demo that I then upload after the match. If I'm not in the game on that PC, which I'm usually not, I'm streaming to Discord. You stream the desktop to Discord so they can watch there as well. So like there's like 5 or 6 different ways just on the coach PC for them to see exactly what you're doing at all times right now. And I think even new measures for Blast is that we have to have, I think actually maybe both of them for Blast and ESL, we have to have like a wide angle camera on everyone that's in the room that the team is playing in
Makes
the facility.
Sense.
So they can see who's communicating and who's looking at what, if there's any discrepancy or anything needs to be checked. So I don't know, there's like literally 8 cameras and like 10 different anti-cheats running and demos recording.
Here's the thing, Jason, like, this is all second half of the season, right? And that was the problem for me. The biggest issue in the first half of the season, and also now you have admins on TeamSpeak, right? So for me the problem wasn't like for me the problem was always like, what if the other team is doing it? Like I have to think in my head they could be doing it. So let's say I'm doing something, I don't know, whatever map, like on Nuke, and I'm doing something that the other team didn't see. Like the players weren't there, but they could see it on stream, right? And you could have, it doesn't have to be your coach. It can be an analyst just, watching the stream, being on TeamSpeak with the team, or just being like next to the coach, or, being on Skype with the coach, whatever, like having a separate line just with the coach and tell them, hey, listen, they're using like these smokes, like only these smokes, like the first 3 gun rounds, right? Like,
and were you actually able to sort of assume that they must have seen it? Is that what you're kind of saying?
But that's what I'm saying, right? Like I am always like super paranoid about this
shit.
Yeah.
I'm always like thinking the worst, right? I'm never thinking best case scenario. I'm always thinking worst case scenario, right? Like
fair enough.
I'm the opposite. I think best of everything, so I don't think anyone's cheating.
Jason, you're still innocent. See you in 2 years, dude. Like, see you in 2 years. But yeah, even down to the stuff like money, right? Like you want to do a buy, like you have mixed money buy where you can buy an op, right? And 2 SMGs, a pistol, and an M4, right? And you're thinking like, let's go for it. We can surprise him with the op. Like the guy has a good spawn, he get an entry, and we can still reset them back, right? It's one of those like reset rounds, big money rounds, but then you're like, but they could maybe see that we have the money for op. And so yeah, I think like, but that was my point at the beginning as well. All these measures combined make it like, just it's not a thing. With the camera, the TeamSpeak, and all the checking, right? So as soon as you did that, and the easiest one and the first one was just the delay and the TeamSpeak, right? After that, it's fine. Like it's just an admin there, and he hears you saying, "Oh, I saw on stream," and that's it. Like you're done, right? So
I think we've gotten to the point now where enough people got banned for so long with the coaching bug, and then the big warning of no stream sniping. Like you'd have to be so stupid to do it at this point. That's not to say that people won't.
As if we don't have stupid people on the scene.
But you really would lose so much. Like it's really not even worth the risk for what potentially might not even be a huge return in value of getting caught like stream sniping and looking at a team's economy from 5 minutes previous. I just don't think it's worth it at this point.
I know, just briefly, like
I didn't think it was worth it 3 months ago either, but apparently that's
just briefly, because someone's probably going to mention, I don't know if you were going to talk about it, Duncan, but one of the factors for the delay and all of this stuff is also like the whole gambling thing, right?
Yes,
some people might have like live data from the gambling sites and all of this stuff and blah, 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 blah. Like, I don't know about that, but for me, it's just simply, competitive integrity comes first and then everything else. So, you need to figure that stuff out after. You can't say like, oh, we can't have a longer delay than 2 minutes because of gambling. It's like,
That was also another concern, by the way, a side angle on that was, very similar, which is that people were worried that if the delay was short enough, then the APIs that gather all that information that they have, or the people who are just doing it manually, the idea was basically if a team was somehow sneakily aligned with some betting database, they could just similarly, you could have someone just feeding you the info in a group chat or something, which is obviously, listen, I'll say there's certain countries in the world I could imagine that was probably going on in, but hopefully not in Europe. How about that? Yeah, get fucked. I'll make that distinction. Subtle enough.
I don't know where I heard that rumor from. I heard that story, and I've seen it kind of in some Reddit comments from a few months back of people saying that there was some group of maybe semi-pro players or some group of players that had access to betting information or a low delay stream, that they were getting fed information of a live stream so that they could appropriately throw for gambling. And I actually inquired about that with the TOs, and was they double checked everything and assured me that it wasn't even possible. But I don't know where that rumor came from, but I heard it as well for a while, and it's just I brought it up publicly once before and got immediate messages from the TOs shooting it down. They were like, we have way too many levels of security on those on any stream. I think they even told me they don't even run a no delay stream in any capacity. So I was basically just reassured that it wasn't physically possible for that to be happening.
I've actually got one other reason. I tweeted it, but I know a lot of people obviously tweets are just ephemeral, aren't they? They just fly down your timeline. You don't remember them as well. People probably won't realise another effect that actually this stream delay thing had, because the first time I encountered the really high stream delay, because think about it, all the events I've done this year is Flashpoint. I did the Blast Showdown in the spring. I didn't do the finals. And so I basically hadn't done an event before Flashpoint 2 in something I'm going to guess 5 months or something. So when I came to Flashpoint 2, the first thing they told me from the production staff was nobody is to tweet out anything live that's happening. And I was like, what? That I said, are you being for real? Because that's literally part of how you engage people in the cast. People want to see if someone does a god tier 1v4, they want to see all the, oh my god, simple, whatever in the chat, and then also the idea is someone who's in Twitter might be wow, better get in this game, look, sounds super sick. So what it basically did was, I was well, how long is the delay? And when they were telling me it was a 3 or 4 minute delay, I was so it's effectively just impossible to tweet and actually do the game then, because basically, yeah, sure, I could pull up a stream separate to the sort of live feed I have in the green room, but if I do that,
your emotion's already over.
Exactly. What am I going to do? Just sit there with my finger over the tweet button, and now, go it's just, it loses the whole effect, doesn't it? It doesn't have the in the moment aspects. I know that's only a minor thing to fans, but that actually did also sap a little bit of my enjoyment of the game. I didn't feel like I could even engage with the people watching the game. I kind of had to pretend I was in a black box and then come out just overly on the desk. So even that angle sucks a bit. What I want to pivot, go on.
It's fine, Duncan. In your case, for Twitter, just Potter can just nudge you when it's time to tweet.
There you go. All right. Right, here's one angle. One way I wanted to pivot this actually. Oh, by the way, Moses, I'll say one thing right now because people might not know this. In particular, I want to actually give mad props to Potter and to Freya, because I don't even know if they really... Put it this way, if Jason Mozo was there, he might, as a friend, have taken these people out to the side and just sort of been have you really considered what it would be like to let Thorin write the lines that you're going to say on camera about ESL Blast? Listen, I know they probably just didn't think of it, Moses, because, we sort of got them in, it was a fun environment, hey, let's just be fun and edgy or whatever. But, I was thinking to myself afterwards, holy shit, wait a minute, I did essentially just get Freya to just roast all the people she's going to work with. And Potter, you work with all the DreamHacks. Why are you saying that? But fair play, they did it. They were soldiers. I appreciated it. What I wanted to pivot this to, though, is because one concern I do actually have because of the online era is I know from talking to some coaches, especially the teams that were really good on LAN before the online period started, some of them told me that they literally went 3 months, some of them, without doing stuff have the coach talk all the time, without obviously even considering stuff you would never do stream snipe and all the rest of it. But one thing I do worry about is if we go back to LAN and so many teams have had, I'll be straight up. Listen, I'll say it right now because he's a guy who watches shows like this, and he's an honest guy. I'll tell you right now, Apex, I'll be real. The real reason I don't call you a great IGL is because, unfortunately, all the things I've heard make it sound like the Extaz guy is really good at the game, and if he can talk while you're calling the game, you haven't been an IGL yet, mate. I know you think you have, but, that's not like when someone's an IGL on LAN and the coach can talk 2 times a half or something. If that guy could really help you, you're doing a good job in what you're doing, but I can't know how much you're doing yet. So I worry if you go offline and you're on your own again, What happens when the coach can't talk? What happens if people have been stream stacked for months and months and months and months and get into that mindset that this is how you play? Like, it makes me think that not only will the results be off, but I think it's going to be such a massive transition just to play LANs for some people again.
Yeah, for sure. I think for us at the beginning, I didn't want to get involved too much because you didn't know that just the fact that I could talk all the time. You know, in theory, I could have been the in-game leader, right? To just let Nico play and change stuff around. But what's the point of that when, you know, eventually things are gonna go back to normal, and then, you know, what are you going to do then? So I think it was just trying to keep things normal, so to speak, but just, you know, helping a bit more with communication and just looking at a bit more things that I would do in practice as well to get people to have these positive habits, positive tendencies, to build them, and then just tone it down more and more, right? So the main benefit was sometimes you could talk without having to take a timeout. So it's just like an equal round, and I could just talk during that round, and we can discuss stuff and come up with a plan for the next couple of rounds without, you know, having to waste a timeout on it or anything like that. But I think it would be a legitimate problem for teams that have switched it all the way up. And if anything, you would want to use this now for anyone who is new at some role or at the in-game leader position to, you know, get all the experience they need and just, you know, fight their way through it.
Yeah, I actually, you know how there was that rumor with the whole stream sniping thing that it was like legal for teams to like have the stream up, like to your tournament organizers like okay. Do you remember that rumor going around at all?
Okay, fair enough.
That's pretty much how I feel about like talking during matches. Like I don't know if it's actually legal. Like I don't actually know, especially now that we have admins recording. Like I don't fuck with it. So
Jason's that guy who even when it's like 2 a.m. and he's drunk and there's no traffic, he's like, oh, it's a red light. I better just wait the pavement for the green light to go. You know, like. Why are you just like lawful good, Moses? You're ridiculous at this point in time, mate.
Listen, you gotta if you
a man of few risks, Jason Moses.
No, if you let that integrity slip for 1 second, it's
true.
Next thing you know, you're fucking coach bugging every fucking step of the way.
There you go.
But no, I don't really fuck with it a whole lot. And I said the same thing. We had a conversation when I joined as a coach about, you know, how I should handle that situation. And I don't know, we just kind of decide on this course of action. I think, you know, I'm going to check and see. I'm sure there's like, you know, I don't know. I'm going to check and double check the rules, and maybe something will change during this era where we have Fallen coming in and can be a little bit more vocal. But I mean, if it's illegal, I'm not fucking doing it, you know? I just don't know if it's allowed.
It's legal, Jason. Like, it's also a simple matter of, hey, ref, can I talk during the game? Yes, you can. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but I don't know. You know, maybe. I'm gonna check the rule book. I'm gonna read into the rule book on this one.
I will also say, by the way, just so it doesn't feel like I'm an isolated Apex there, I will also say, I'll throw a couple of other obvious names out there. Like, you know what, Heroic? You were fucking sick until Hunter got banned, and then 1 month later, you never placed fucking top 4 ever again. Like, weird how that works. Similarly, we all give Magus credit when he came out and said, like, I was actually the one calling for basically, like, 2 of these championships, like the EPL championships, I think.
I also call bullshit on that one.
Listen, even if he was
in-game leading when Glaive came back into the lineup, I think that was just like.
I agree on the Glaive one, but put it this way: when they had the other players, the problem is, mate, you had Zonic behind you, and we already know that famous rumor that Zonic used to just call a bunch of the fucking scrims anyway. So it's like, even if you did some of it, listen, you won those tournaments, but like, come on, mate, you had someone who essentially probably, if coaching was back where you could be an IGL, would be an IGL at this point in time. So like, I'm not taking full credit away. I'm just saying there's a little asterisk next to those ones. Come on.
And you also can't underestimate the fact of playing on LAN, right? Like, it's way more stressful. You have these players who you could also tell they seem like a bit nervous on camera as well when you watch them just online. So imagine on LAN, right? You have the pressure of performing yourself and you're also leading the team. So you're going to have people who are going to crumble under that sort of pressure on LAN, or maybe not necessarily crumble, but they're definitely going to struggle way more, either individually or their calling is going to drop off by some margin. So, you know, it's not just the inexperienced players on LAN who are playing much better online, right? It's also for the in-game leaders, how their team is going to perform in terms of calling, and also individually, are they going to drop off significantly?
All right, let's see if I can draw you both into the minefield here, where I just permanently exist, by the way. I never go into, like, fucking, you know, like, neutral territory. I just stay in the no man's land. Just don't blow up from the mines, hopefully. No one else is willing to do this, Yanko, because everyone else is a fucking pussy in this scene, right? obviously there are certain teams and players who've had incredible results and incredible placings and world rankings that, like, it's not that it's impossible it could happen online, it's just that a lot of us would probably say, yeah, probably not. So I'll give you one that I am actually a bit torn about, because when they had their summer run and Big became #1 team in the world, I have to admit, I think there are some degrees to which they're one of the teams that got semi-robbed by us not being online. Because I think some of the things they did would have translated online, actually. Like, for example, I think the style that they play actually would work pretty well. I think that would eat up a lot of teams that probably could even beat them now online. That part I could believe. My problem is this. Some of those players, I'm going to say right now, Sirison, for example, mate, if you can make that AWPing style work online, you'll just be one of the best players in the entire world immediately. So if you want me to believe you went from alternate attacks to you're going to be like a top 10 player in the world, I don't know, but listen, it's just very rare that happens. Similarly, Xantares, when I was watching him at Flashpoint, I had a mad depressing realization about this guy, which is because he's played at the low level so long. He just plays off his aim too much, Shanko. Like, if he's ever in like a 1v2 or something and he's on the 2 side, he just peaks instantly. Because obviously, if you're playing shitters who are way worse, you just shoot him in the head. Yeah, you've got really good aim. But if he plays, go watch him when he plays the best teams. Like, in that scenario, that's just going to get you, like, if you play Astralis, they want you to peak them in that scenario. That's how they win the 1v2. So, to me, like, they're one of the teams. Heroic's an obvious one, because, like, listen, let's just be real. Like, every one of these players, like, didn't make it as a star in the Danish team before we went online. So the idea you're all in one team, with, by the way, with no fucking support players, as far as I can tell, and you had a cheating coach, and magically you won all to get out my face. Like, you know, like, I'm not saying it can't happen. Maybe you could be really good. I'm sure some of you are good. My problem is I can't act like that's the same as a real massive LAN performance where I don't have to have any considerations, questions. So, does anyone else have any thoughts? You want to come in on either of these two teams? Is there another team you want to list? Come on, it's up to you where you want to go on this one.
I think that's, you know, the clear and obvious choice, right? And I agree that listen, if I can try to explain in words like what's the difference between LAN and online play in terms of, you know, what is it that makes a player play different, right? Like how do they play different? I think, like, for example, you play a team like Big, when we play them online a couple of times, it's every decision is like really good that they make during the game, and the timing of the decision is like almost like instant, right? The reactions are super fast. It's all good reactions, right? So you always need to be on top of your game as well to be able to counter that. And I think that's the difference with some of those teams, LAN compared to online, is on LAN, that decision might not be, you know, the best one that they make, or it could be a good decision, but the timing can be like late by 2 seconds. And that's all it takes for it not to work, right? On like high level, like Counter-Strike is really fast paced now as well. That's the one thing that's a big difference. Obviously, players feeling a little bit more relaxed, and also the individual plays they go for, right? Because of the lack of pressure, the environment is something they're familiar with. Like, just like now I'm sitting in my room, right? So just sitting there drinking a Coke Zero, as people would say, and gaming, right? So also, you know, it's like a 14-14 game, you know, winner's bracket or loser's bracket final, and, you know, a guy is going for some mad aggressive play after he got shut down like already 2 times doing something similar. It's like, you're not going to do that on LAN. You're just not. And if you are, you're probably not going to be in a position to play for a team that's going to play that late in the tournament, right? And that was some of the, you know, frustration in some of the guys on my team as well, because they're so experienced. Like, they've seen that. they've been in those games, and they've been in the other games online and so on, and you just know, like, that wouldn't happen, but it's something that you need to battle through as an experienced player. For me, an interesting one also is Vitality, in the sense that they were obviously also a very good team before, right, before the changes and everything, but they've been playing on a high level. Like you said, you know, Apex, you still want to see him, like how the team does on LAN. I've had games where RPK has 40 kills against me on Dust 2.
True.
Right? Like, get the fuck out, you know, like,
I agree.
Why is this happening to me? Like, he's winning like 1v4s, those things like that, you know. I like the guy, you know, and I think it was great that he managed to come back and play on a high level. But, you know, I actually went and looked up when was the last time he had 40 kills in a LAN game. It was something like 2002. I'm kidding, it wasn't 2002.
No, it was probably like 4 years ago. Yeah,
it was a long time ago, right? Some like shit game against a really bad team. So, you know, there you have a couple of teams like that potentially. Furia, there was also the roster lock, so it's really like you can't really compare it. Not roster lock, region lock, right? So you can't really compare it. But they've been doing much better. And I think once they came to EU, you could tell like they couldn't really get over that last hump, right? Beating like a real like tier 1 team from Europe, taking down Astralis or Navi or something along those lines. So I think there's definitely a couple of teams in there, a couple of players that, and I think if you ask those players, they obviously can't say, yeah, we're shit, we're just like very good online. They will say like, you play in the same conditions like everyone else. But I think they would probably agree that, yeah, we still have to prove it on LAN, right? I mean, Big or Heroic being the number 1 team in the world, I don't think that was ever the case realistically. Under the circumstances, maybe, but yeah, you definitely want to see them do it, in a more high pressure environment on LAN as well. And then if they can do that, imagine how much more baller it would be. Like everyone was doubting them, and they came and they just spat in everyone's face and like, yeah, we're here, like we're legit. And then it's a really great story, right? But first that has to happen in my mind.
I feel like we all got robbed not being able to see the furia that we had towards the end of the year and how good they were play and land when they were like hitting that kind of a peak. And I don't, I honestly thought when they came over to Europe that they would get beat up a little bit more than they did. So I was actually kind of impressed by how they kind of stood up over here to a certain degree. But I really wanted to see if they could make that style work on land, like the hyper aggressive opping, the crazy ass aggression through smokes, and just constant pushing. I mean, they have such good mid round reactions, which really carried them. But I think it would have been really cool because I feel like it's been a while since we've seen a team play with that kind of a style and also able to make it work on LAN. And if they were going to be a team to do it, that would have been absolutely fucking amazing. I actually would have thought that was really cool. So I feel like we got robbed a little bit by not being able to see if they'd be able to challenge the way that they did in a LAN environment.
Yep. And one thing that I'm looking through like the rankings now just to see if I forgot someone, and I want to mention it, but this is also a team that I like watching. I think they also play good CS, but also Complexity at some moments during the season also played like
lights
really,
out. Yeah,
lights
too
out.
good,
Yeah,
too
exactly.
good in some ways. Yeah, I agree.
Which is also a team that you wouldn't really expect that from them. Like for them, I feel like that's why I didn't mention them initially. And I had when I saw their name, I like remember because you could see that happening potentially even on LAN because they were going in an upwards trend. So. Yeah, maybe not to the same extent like some of the other teams, but it's also like, a young team, young players still have like some things to figure out and go through when it comes to LAN. But I'm looking forward to seeing these teams on LAN. It's one of those things where you really want to see what happens. And as you said, like definitely Big and Complexity are 2 teams that play more team-oriented Counter-Strike, a little bit more than Heroic. So yeah, all these teams on paper have what it takes to do it. You just need to go out and get it done.
By the way, on the complexity angle, that actually ties into something that someone asked me in an AMA recently, which is a fan. Obviously, you remember, like CSGO itself has been around so long now. There's tons of fans who never watched like what to us were the glory days, Yeah. So there was a fan who asked me. It's a pretty good question actually. If you didn't watch that era, he just said like how good actually was Happy, because obviously he knows I've criticised him a lot. So I actually explained that. Oh no, listen, like at his peak, this guy was like a really good individual player, and he was having a big impact on the game. So, and it actually made me realise as I was answering, because I gave the comparison to like Blame F, because obviously Blame F is like the biggest fragger on his team, but he's the IGL at the same time. So I even said though, like in some ways though, that does sort of show you that we don't actually consider these online results that legit, because Blame F doesn't have the rep that Happy did when he was at his peak. Like, dude, people thought Happy was like a top 10 player in the entire world. Like, I even thought they overrated him a little bit because obviously I didn't like his style a little bit, but I'd say the same thing for Blame F. Look at the numbers Blame F has put up this year. Dude, if this was LAN, he would be an enormous story every fucking month. Like, he sort of has, the odd time where someone will make a thread and people enjoy, but people aren't going that crazy over him, People aren't putting him in outrageous conversations and X-players the best or whatever. So that's the point as well. Like, I also suspect some of those, like, the numbers wouldn't be as crazy on LAN. Because if they were, by the way, then he's apparently as an IGL, some sort of, like, Zero type figure who's just going to come on the scene and just be instantly god tier, which, listen, I just don't buy it, There's only a few people like Zero who can ever do that. It's very rare that ever happens.
Yeah, it's like usually with team game leaders, you have one of 2 kinds in how they play. Like either they're the guy who, when you're faking a default and you want to explode or do something, like they're the ones faking and doing all that stuff, right? And then lurking afterwards because they feel like they can really nail the timing for that, and they will just say go to the other side, and the other 4 guys already know what they're doing, right? Or they're the person going with the team in the group, kind of leading the way, and they have some other lurker doing all the other stuff, maybe one of the star players, right? So like Blame, Alexi is similar to that, Alex is similar to that style,
Yes.
in a sense, right? And that might help your stats a little bit, but not to the extent that he's been putting out. So he's like definitely having like probably a lot more impact than you're supposed to, even from that position. So yeah, he's been playing great, and I think just from the stuff you hear in interviews from maybe like Jason Lake or whoever, is that he's also a super hard worker, does everything he needs to do on the team, like in terms of strategies, building the playbook and all of that stuff, while also maintaining a high level individually. So I think it's also, there's nothing more you can really ask from the guy.
I also think, by the way, on the angle of like teams where it probably hurt them playing online, that's one of the reasons, in my opinion. I'm sure player angle, like form, was a big part, but in my opinion, on like a strategical level, I think that's part of why Fnatic and Mousesports struggled so much this year, especially with the old lineups. Because like, look at Fnatic. The joke I made to JW on the show, Moses, but it's kind of true, is like, if you don't like it, JW, when you play online now, and because it's kind of like free of pressure in some sense, contrasted to like, an IEM final, yeah, people are making all these crazy moves and trying like ballsy pushes. It's like, if you don't like that, to be fair, that's what you do to people online, but the key is you do it online. Like, you'll do it in that big final I'm referring to before. That's why no one will be able to expect it or believe that you'll do it again. Similarly, with Mousesports, like, if one of Mousesports' strength was Carrigan mid-rounding, right, that's not going to be as effective if it's just a random online match, where if I'm like doing mid-round calls where like I'm trying to punish a specific position, online, I can make that player feel really uncomfortable and just ruin his game. Online, it's not going to have the same effect, is it? Like, Andy might just play way better. Like, he might not be under pressure the same way. Like, I think these teams, like, unfortunately, almost took some of the essence of what they actually represented in the scene.
Yeah, I think also, well, with those two specific examples, I would also look at, and maybe this is something I'm a little bit more sympathetic to, is there's obviously been some issues within teams like Mousesports and like Fnatic, dropping Flusha, Mousesports looking like they're going to be dropping Kerrigan and Chris J. That announcement just came out. So I think when you take this online era and you take this like monotonous, every single event is the same, and you take teams and players that have been playing in arenas for years and then stick them in their bedrooms, I think you're just seeing like any small issue within a team and amongst players gets like exacerbated, right? Like it just blows up to way, way bigger than it. And you add in everyone's been fucking quarantined for an entire year, so everyone's going a little bit crazy and everyone's a little bit more on edge and quicker to whatever frustration and emotions just kind of flare up very, very fast. I think you're starting to see some of these teams that have those issues, like you add this online era into it, and that's just the straw that's breaking the camel's back in a lot of cases. So I think there's probably been a lot of internal issues that have affected some of the more established teams coming into it. I think the online era has helped boost some of the tier 2 teams to be a little bit better because players are more comfortable. There's less pressure in these online games. They're used to this environment. Every match and event that they're playing in the online era is like their Super Bowl as compared to the other players. So it's not that I don't want to make those kind of excuses, but I just think there's a lot of reasons why even small problems are just getting blown up to be bigger than they actually are at the moment within some of these teams. And it's hard when it's lasted this long to keep everything together in some cases, as we're seeing a lot of rosters kind of blow up and morph and change a little bit.
Even Duncan's favorite player-oriented org, Astralis,
there we go.
Couldn't keep all their player off of sickly, right? We saw players actually have to take a break, right? And just get away from CS a little bit because it was all getting too much combined with COVID and everything else. So yeah, there's definitely been a lot of weird circumstances this year or last year.
Right, here's a topic that's interesting, but to some people it might be controversial. I don't think it's actually controversial if you listen to the way I'm going to describe it. If you know the whole angle, like obviously the reason I've sort of stayed generally, Yanko, away from the whole like 6-man rotation topic because it wasn't real before. Like I knew behind the scenes Astralis wasn't doing it for that. They were doing it because, as you say, they knew people would leave on sick leave. They knew people potentially might not even return to the team. I've hinted at it before. There was at least one Astralis player was straight up willing to join another team if they'd have paid the right amount. So like it was essentially they were just doing PR. It was optics, to make it look like no, it's our choice that this is another real player. Like they were just kind of being silly beggars. But now that Vitality did it and actually like won tournaments and did it for real, I have to consider it as something of a real thing. But here's what I want to ask. I'm still cynical enough, Janko, that I don't fully believe it. As in, I kind of think it's because we are online. I think even Vitality, by the way, in my opinion, if we go to LAN tomorrow and then you transport us forward in time 6 months, I think they just have a 5-man lineup and either Nevera's in it or he isn't. Like, I think one of the reasons these teams are also doing it is because at the moment, listen, sure, Vitality isn't playing like throwaway games. These are still like championships and they're in the finals and stuff. But it's a way of also not having to do what, in my opinion, is very dangerous, which is what Moses' team did, like bringing a player like Grim. That guy looked amazing, but we've only seen him online. I've never seen him play an IEM Katowice quarterfinal. So the problem is, I know in that case, they removed the player that was reasonable too. But let's imagine, I'll just do a hypothetical. Let's imagine that move happened now and it was like Twists you're replacing. So a guy that was a monster online, but now he's doing bad online, and you replace him with a guy who's like an up-and-comer, but his reputation is mainly built online. The concern for me then, obviously, is what happens when we go to LAN in that setting. Like, what if that guy fails immediately? But the problem is I'm Team Liquid. I can't afford to fail. I have to succeed eventually. I can't have 5 tournaments in a row where I'm last place. So I think cynically, some of these orgs are also doing it to be like, right, we're going to slowly transition this guy, we're going to sort of test that he fits our... Basically, it's like a trial, but just live, if you know. Like, I know it's a bit of an out there theory, but I personally think that's what they're doing. Because I would just go the other way. If it's real, and Vitality is doing a real 6-man lineup, and Astralis, who conveniently, after everyone called them out after Vitality had already been doing it, magically just started playing Bobsky on one map. So if these teams really are doing 6-man rotations and there's a benefit, then if anything, aren't teams like G2 morons for Cotton Jacks, or, the teams that cut the 6th player, like, shouldn't they keep someone around? What do you think on this topic, Janko? Are you cynical enough to be in my camp, or do you think it's real?
No, I'm somewhere in between, right? I think, for example, well, the thing you need to include as well is, the logistics of it, switching a player on LAN in between maps. So does he just sit in the same PC, right? So he needs to put his gear in, settings, right, really quickly. Of course, the SSD comes in, but the monitor settings, do you let him warm up, or is he warming up during the map, right? While they're playing the first map, he's just DMing, or is he watching the game, right? Like, there's all this stuff you need to figure out. But let's say you figure all this out. I think, for example, Vitality brings all 6 players to the tournament. I think what they might do is they look at the game beforehand, they try to figure out the veto, which you can probably do to 90% certain most of the time, at least, if not more, about the maps, the exact maps, and then you just say, okay, against Heroic, we're playing these 5 guys the whole series. You're not gonna switch them out for just Inferno or Dust 2 maybe, right? So you put the guy in to play the whole series, depending on the exact map pool. So I think they might try to do something like that, because otherwise, what's the point of doing all the experimenting while it was the online era? So I see, especially an org like them, because they seem to be one of those orgs, that are very much willing to try new things. That they have a huge support staff around the team. Like, I think they're one of definitely the best orgs in CS right now. I don't know how they do in other games, but when it comes to CS, the way they approach their team, I think it's maybe even the best out there from what I can tell. So I could see them doing it, just not switching in during the match. I think that would be a little bit too crazy at first, but down the line, who knows?
I mean, I think the biggest question with it is, I feel like I already know the answer to it, is it going to be allowed at the major? What happens if you go to a major and they don't let you do a 6-man rotation, and then all of a sudden you have Shox who hasn't played Inferno or you have someone who hasn't played Inferno or a map in like 5-6 months, and then you're like, oh god, here we go, let's roll the dice. So I think that's a huge danger. It'll be interesting to see, like, let's say, do they run the 6-man rotation and switch them out on maps up to like 2 months before the major, and then you start to reincorporate the other guy, or you start to make a decision of the 5 you're going to bring to the major? How is that going to work with the sub? Because one of the sub slots is the coach position. So you get into a really weird area there. Other than that, I don't think that is a very cynical way for you to look at it, Duncan, that it's like a player coming in.
Are you surprised?
To phase somebody out slowly over time. No, I'm not surprised. But I do think, I don't think you have a wrong read on it. I just think that's a very cynical way to describe it, because I think, especially in a time where buyouts are so expensive and salaries are so crazy, there's a benefit to going out and getting a young guy that your team would probably never really want to consider or try to be like a 5-man starting rotation, and you give him whatever X amount of time. You sign him to like a really small contract. He's got like 2 years, and maybe for the first 6 months it's just a player that you throw him into practice once in a while. You have him there, making sure that he's like following the scrims and following the strategies and understanding how the team likes to play, and you add them into some scrims here or there when a player wants a day off, and that's a way you can kind of just phase in a new player over time, not like in like the cynical, like, we got to get this fucking guy off our roster, let's start like slowly incorporating this guy, but just have like a safety net of, if a player wants to leave, or if a player gets sick, or in a COVID time a player can't travel, has a visa, it's a backup plan, or just a way to make sure that you have like a continuity of your team's culture, moving forward. For a team like Astralis that have built like such a good culture and a good winning tradition, like, you'd want to have a player incorporated and steeped in that culture before just throwing him into the heavy matches. So it makes sense to me from that perspective. Just maybe not as like, evil villain type angle on it.
Also, never underestimate the power of the bench, like just to keep your starting five on edge, right? Like just having that ability, that opportunity to say, hey, listen, if you're not going to do what I tell you to do, and if you're not going to put in the hours and work on the things you need to work on, I have a guy right here, I'm going to put him in, I don't care, right? Because that's the thing, in CS, it still hasn't gotten over that hump, we're going to do whatever it takes just to win, right? And give ourselves the best. People don't worry about culture as much, and, making sure that no matter which 5 players you have, the team is like trending the same way, or there's a certain way of doing things that will not change. And I think we will see more and more of that, where there's a star player, like look what Cloud9 did with Toxic. I didn't really follow everything that happened, like I don't really know exactly why he got benched. I don't know if they even like explained it in detail, but he was obviously like the star signing or something. 2 months later,
yes,
he's benched for whatever reason it is. The reason doesn't even matter. What matters is the willingness of the org to bench their star player after they, paid a lot from, which was probably like hurts them a lot.
Yes.
Right? And just like make the statement, if you're not going to get on with the program, you're not going to be a part of the program. Right? Like there's definitely, less money for him if he's benched and all this stuff. Right? So it's not like he's just sitting there collecting a full paycheck, not playing. Right? There's definitely detriments to being on the bench, besides the simple fact that you're not, playing the official games, which is why everyone is doing it. So I think that's also a powerful thing to have, where you can get someone to get in line by having this opportunity to put them on the bench and swap them in with someone. And that also, as Jason said, if it's a younger player, if he proves himself, well, there you have it. Like you have, for much less money, you have someone who, if he can do the job as well, like why do you care if it's this name or that name? You just need someone to get the job done. And so that's why I think having that 6-man roster can be very powerful, even if you don't use the 6th player as much as some of the other teams do.
Because basically, there's actually yeah, go on.
I was gonna say, well, the way we kind of talked about it just kind of is like cutting the corner of like the real idea behind a 6-man roster. Like, are you gonna have a 6-man roster with that player that you eventually want to bring in over time, or are you gonna actually have someone who rotates into play matches? I guess is the big difference of what we're covering. Because I don't know, until the major question is answered to me, I don't know. I don't even think that there's like a reality that a 6-man roster can work, because then that'd be like a huge, like all your plans of having this 6-man guy who's going to be like, this guy's going to know everything about every opponent we play on 2 maps, and then he's like your specialist if those maps are in the series. But if you can't use him at the major, then I mean, you have all this stuff that you've prepared and practiced, and this is how you've played for the entire year, and then you just don't have it available at the biggest tournament in the calendar. So I think that's too much of a risk in my mind. But if you use it the other way, where it's not some kind of a rotation unless it becomes emergency necessary and for whatever reason, that's where I think it's a bit more realistic.
Yeah, but
go on.
Yeah, sorry, but just quickly, like it's not like you're throwing away like here's a question for you, Jason. Let's say you have a 6-man roster and it's working really well at all these tournaments, CSL, Blast, and stuff. You're winning a tournament here and there. You're definitely always a contender, but you cannot use it for the major. Like, would you make that trade-off where you just keep going with that and then you just figure it out in whichever way you can? Listen, you can have a 6-man. Well, you cannot have your coach and register the 6 players. I just don't know yet in the current rulebook if you can swap them in and out between games. Not sure about that.
I don't think you can, because in the old one you didn't used to be able to. That's why, if you remember that famous tournament where Nip had to play with Threat as the coach, even though Pith arrived late, but he was in theory in time to play. But I know back then the rule was you couldn't. You had to declare at the beginning of the tournament somehow.
But let's even say worst case scenario, you can't even do that, right? So you just figure out of the 6 which 5 you're going to use. Probably it's going to definitely going to hinder you for that one tournament, but it's not like you suddenly turn to shit just because of that. So you'll probably still have a good chance to make a deep run. If the stars align, you might even win the whole thing. Like, would you make that trade-off, or would you just, because of the majors, just pick out 5 and stick with the 5 throughout the whole year, even though it means, you might be weaker in some of these other third-party tournaments?
Yeah, basically, would you do it in the short term for the benefit, or would you play for the longer term one, like winning the major? Yeah, that makes sense. Basically, what I was going to say was this. One of the reasons I'm cynical, Moses, is because I actually have, as with a lot of topics in esports, because I actually am in multiple other esports, and oftentimes they're drastically different how they deal with things. It's a bit like how I always told people that double a limb would be awesome, and people were like, but would it though? But how would it work? It's like, I've watched Dota and even original CS for years. I've already seen how all the scenarios play out. So similarly, the precedent for where this has happened actually is in League of Legends, and particularly actually in the LCS, because in North America, obviously, you have a lot of money in League of Legends, where what they would typically do if they had subs in that game, because in theory, in that game in particular, because you can literally play different champions, and like this guy might be good at these ones and the other at a different style. That's even a game which almost implies you should try and get a sub if you can, so you could actually switch up your entire playing style, more extreme than you would in CS, the guy's playing a spot or whatever. But basically, it tended to go like this. The problem was, just like we have now in CS, which is, if you wanted a real 6-man rotation, you need that 6-man to actually be good enough that on the other map, he essentially is a starter. So he essentially needs to be good enough to be a starter for your team, but somehow will only play a couple of maps or half the map. I don't know how you'd manage it, because obviously, in the future, people imply you wouldn't just do one for one player. Maybe you'd do a couple of players and there'd be a rotation, like the old school attempts. And the problem is this, because you could never get a player like that, because let's face it, he would just go and join another team in the same league and just be a starter for a lesser team, or get more money by being a starter. What you tend to do is bring in inexperienced players like the Neveras of the world, etc. You bring them in, and what you do is, first of all, it's a great PR shield, because you're not really removing the guy that you're thinking about maybe removing, or you're thinking it's his last year. You sort of he plays some of the games, and then you just bring the other guy in occasionally, and so a fan can even still be a fan of the old school player, but be like, oh yeah, cool to see this new guy rising. But then basically, at the end of the year, right, these players never stay, because it goes like this. Either they proved they were good enough to be a starter, and now you either must offer them the starter spot, or cleverly you'll just sell them to someone else, that you sell them for money. It's what you could do. It's what I, in my opinion, think the Astralis will inevitably do with Bobski if they keep the original 5. They'll just sell him this year to someone else for good money, maybe even in the next couple of months. Or you go the other route and he is good enough, in which case you kick your old guy and you just put this guy in. And the best thing is, now there's no hard cut point where it's you're replacing double lift and people are holy fuck, unless you're basically the best in the region, you're just going to instantly be a failure. No, you've had, people have gotten used to the idea that you could have potential, you have worked in the team. So basically from other games, It just tends to be the way, because the problem I have is this. The two examples of it in theory working, and I'll say in theory because these teams have won tournaments, so I'll give them the credit for the sake of the example that Astralis and Vitality are really doing the 6-man rotation. Here's the problem. Online, maybe people can be cool with it. Maybe people can smile and go. Maybe Bobski can really believe he won all those championships. As opposed to, I know one of them, for example, he came in on Nuke and got I don't know, 10 frags or something. So I don't know how he then goes, yeah, we are the champion. Mate, you didn't really win that. So my problem is this. That might be all well and good online. But if Nevera really is good, and by the way, his potential looks great. If Bobski is as good as he looked in Mad Lions, let's say they're at IEM Katowice in a future year, right? And it's the final, and you can sub people in Yanko, and it's map 3 of a best of 5. In comes Bobski, and you know what, mate? He frags out 28 frags on Nuke. He's carrying the CT side, and then Zonic goes, great job. Back to the bench. We're going to play map 5 now. Who the fuck would agree to that? Yeah. If I'm good enough to get in that position, I'll only do that in the short term, I might do that for a few months. Listen, maybe if it's an extreme one like Nevera, where he sort of hadn't made it through to the top, maybe I'd last 6 months, a year. But that can't be a long-term solution, really, I think.
But this happened in one of the Vitality games. I don't know if it was a grand final or something like that. First map, Misuta plays, I think it was Vertigo, and he has over 30 kills, and they just bang out the other team. And then he gets swapped out for the second map, right? And they lose the second map, which is the map he usually never plays for them. But it's well, he was in such an insane game, he's obviously red hot at the moment. Maybe you want to, leave him in and just see how he does, regardless of the fact that, but that's one of the things that why I praised them for doing it online. They swapped him out, it didn't work out, and now they're probably going to review it and say, okay, next time, let's try to leave it, see how that works. and try to figure that out. So yeah, I think on LAN definitely to be also. I think you were talking more from the side of the actual player that he would be probably tilted as fuck for getting removed right after having a sick map, but that all comes down to team talk and beforehand setting things straight, right? If Babsky comes into that game or into that match knowing I'm gonna play these maps no matter what, right? If I have one kill, in the first map that I'm playing, like let's say I'm playing Nuke, if I get 3 kills on this map, but I'm also the guy who plays Inferno, and Inferno is the 4th map, I'm gonna play again. So I need to get my head straight if I need to come in that I'm gonna do better and actually be useful for my team. Or if it's the other way around, okay, if I have a good game, no matter the map, I might keep playing, or if I have a bad one, I might not get like subbed in for the next map. But I like the first one better, where beforehand, you're gonna use you on these maps, no matter what. Be prepared, be ready if it comes to that. If we end up playing it, to perform, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you set those expectations, that would help. I like, again, this is me being like a little bit more like rose-tinted glasses, but I like to believe that you'd have to have a lot of confidence in like your team cohesion and the culture that you've built and everyone being like happy and comfortable within the team. But I mean, listen, it happens all the time in traditional sports. Like, players get pulled out for like the last 5 seconds of a basketball game or for the final play of a football game. So, I mean, now those are obviously, that's an extreme example because those sports and those team environments are way more evolved and way more, progressed than where we are as a team. But I mean, I don't know. I guess you'd have to look at this like whole like idea of a 6-man rotation as the stepping stone to getting to a point where you have, a Counter-Strike team the way that most other teams have subs in those situations set up. So I don't know. It's just, I think it's one of those things that we'd have to get to. I think I think it would be rocky in the short term as this gets tested out. But I think, everyone in the scene, as soon as people start to make it work, I think other teams in the scene will be able to make it work as well.
And also, me, Duncan, like, I had a bit of a different upbringing and the environment here is different. Like, I played basketball for 10 years. Like, the shit that my coach used to tell us and like the stuff that he used to pull during games and stuff, like, you sometimes wish you could do something similar. I feel like everyone, like a lot of coaches are walking on eggshells with players, right? You don't want to upset anyone too much. You don't want to hurt his feelings too much because, then he's going to get all emo and you can't get him like to do anything after that. Like, why not? Like, you have 6 players, right? And some guys, like, he came into, no matter what you did on that day, like, you did the whole routine, you got the team together, you did the walkthrough, breakfast, all the stuff, blah, 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 and you come to the game, you see some guys just, like, he's just fucking zoned out, right? Like, he's just not there for whatever reason, like, he's not focused, all of that. He can be one of your better players. It might not even be one of these map-specific subs, right? And I just go after the map and I say, you're fucking out. Like, get the fuck out, from the PC. You're not playing more, and you're not playing anymore today. Like, if you're gonna behave like this, right, you're not gonna play until further notice, until you get your shit together, right? Until you get your act together, and then you just put the other guy in, right? Like, I think it's happening less and less because you get more and more new players who, the older generation of players is spoiled because they had success and they had a lot more power in teams, or even still have a lot of power in teams and decision making, all of that stuff. And obviously, why would you want to give that up, right? Because you can decide everything for yourself instead of the org in a way it's supposed to be. So I think with some of that you might be seeing it, but I'm just like, it's just.
What are you reliving your glory days of kicking Harry off the team at the show match? I would love to see you do that to like fucking Olaf on a big stage.
I mean, it would never happen to Olaf, but some of the other players potentially, like, just get him, like, throw him off the stage into the crowd and like, you deal with this guy now. He's just get the fuck off. You're fired. Like, you just fire him there on the spot.
That is definitely though why the fact that fans attempt to scrutinise coaches like they scrutinise sports coaches or like football managers is ridiculous though, Janko. Because as you say, like, nobody does that pretty much. Like, the only person I think in the entire scene, well, maybe Extaz as well is in this mix now because of where their orgs are. I think, in my opinion, only Extaz and Zonic in the entire scene are really like almost unremovable, even by their own players. Almost every other coach, first of all, could literally be removed if like 4 out of the 5 players just said, I won't play again, or I want to leave, or I'll leave on free agency if this guy's gone. The org would probably cut them. And more importantly, they just don't do that anyway. Like, if you think of the legendary coaches in basketball, NFL, it's the other way around, Janko. Like, it's the player who's worried about the pissing the coach off, because as you say, the coach will just yank your ass. Like the most extreme ones, like the fucking, you know, Greg Popovich's, they'll even do it if you're like the star player. They'll just be like, you know, I'm going to keep everyone in line this way. I'm going to like tear this guy up too. So I think fans don't realise, like, I know if you go too far this way, they think coaches do nothing, but it's like coaches don't have like the level of control you imagine. That's why I asked at the beginning, how is it different? Because I know a fan thinks if they come in, like for example, a fan thinks if they go and join the teams you joined, like if they go and join MIBR, they're just going to tell Coldzera how they want him to play, or, you know, actually, Fur, I don't want you to be as aggressive as anymore. Like, you're not even, listen, you could make a suggestion or maybe try, like, you know. Exactly.
Nice one.
I'd like to see that. Put it this way, if anyone ever attempts that, just please record it. Like, put like a candid camera somewhere, just so like one day we can see what it's like, because you'll be the one getting tossed out the room, mate, like fucking Jazzy Jeff on the Fresh Prince or something. They'll just heave you out the door at that point in time. Like,
yeah, that's why I like the NFL, right? As the ultimate team sport. Like there, it can really be, you know, this season you're the MVP, and the next you're having a bad year, and the year after that, if you're still underperforming, you're gonna get released from the team, right? Like you're just being dead weight at that point, you know. And there's so much, and I think all this conversation about the sixth player and all of that stuff, I think you could have, as we didn't even imagine it a couple of years back. Like the main reason why it's even a thing is the increase in talent.
Yes.
Right, and the fact that the average, you know, player is much more skilled today than he was 3-4 years ago. So now you have the luxury of, you have a guy who can be good enough that you would consider putting it into your team, but, you know, another team maybe cannot afford them, or he will just come for the better salary despite the fact that he wouldn't be an active player. So I think if we continue going in an upwards trend, which, you know, maybe it's not 100% certain in terms of the player base and everything and all of that stuff, I think you're going to see more and more of it. Like more teams are going to pick up 6-man rosters. More teams are actually going to have all 6 players play, not just have like a 6th guy there in case of emergency or whatever, injury or something along those lines. And yeah, I'm hopeful about I'm hopeful for it. Like just like with everything else, anything that gives an edge to a team, like the other teams are probably gonna start and try to mimic that and try to catch up.
By the way, one topic I thought we could also do before, because we've still got like a 20 minutes or so, I'm going to do some content on this separately where I'm actually going to get like expert people in the industry that are going to talk about. But I want to get you guys' thoughts as coaches and people who know the players and stuff. Because one area I actually do foresee some issues in CS, because it's going on right now with negotiations in the last 3 months especially, is a lot of the tier 1 players haven't actually, in my opinion, been properly paying attention to the likes of the Chaoses of the world leaving the game, Gen Gs of the world not signing it. They actually don't seem to realise the market they're in, because I know a lot of players who got way too used to their salary always being 20k a month, 25k, and they all think that money's there for everyone still. And they think they can like hard negotiate. In fact, they even think they're entitled to it. Like they don't pay attention to the business side. They just think it's what CS was a year ago, you know? And so I actually wondered on that angle, because at the moment, if you look at CS, the concern isn't tier 1. Tier 1's fine. We've got all the top teams, all the top players. It's that a load of the sort of tier 2 and tier 3, either the orgs are out or that's why the players are going to Valorant. So like, it sounds like that's the area where like even being able to have a team or having your salary slashed is the real concern. So like, do players actually, have you got the sense they understand this, Moses? I mean, at the moment, it seems like a lot of them still just think it's business as usual.
Everyone, no, I mean, at least my players have been keeping a close eye on it and kind of understand that the scene's in kind of a weird place. I mean, I don't think you can exist as a player in a team that operates out of North America and not recognize that there's you know, a real reckoning kind of around the corner possibly. So yeah, they all respect it and understand it. Again, it comes down to the question is never whether it's been there or whether it's coming. It's what can they do about it, you know?
Yes.
Like what can the players really do about it? Because I mean, listen, there's some expensive salaries and some inflated salaries and some overpaid salaries, but if you're a player getting offered this money, like you're not going to say no to it.
No, I get it.
You know,
Yeah.
like you're not going to volunteer and be like, nah, thanks for the offer, but I'll take like 20% less. It's all good. So I think the question for the players is like they recognize all these pitfalls coming in the industry, and they recognize there's a lot of stuff like finally, like, you know, the chicken's finally coming home to roost. So I think for the players, it's more just like how can we help, or how can we do something differently, and you know, how can we kind of support the scene well enough to get those tier 2 teams back, or more organizations interested again in investing, especially in the North American scene.
Okay, Duncan, you know, like Jason is a nice guy and all. He's always
Come on.
politically correct and everything. I'll tell you, the players don't give a fuck about like other players. If it's not directly concerned for them, and barring a few players who are probably involved in CSPPA, right? So they
Sure.
kind of, it's like their job to think about everyone. Bro, we've had talks, you know, about with these like leagues or whatever, an org, and there's like revenue share, and you know, like someone from the org wants to talk to the whole team to explain to the players, you know, the options and all of this stuff. Like 4 out of the 5 players, like we were boot camping at the time, are on deathmatch, and they're just on the call and they're not like paying attention.
They don't give
at
a
all.
fuck. Yeah.
This is like their future for the next 3 or 5 years, right?
Yes.
They're talking about. There's one guy who's actually like trying to pay attention and ask questions, and who's disagreeing with some stuff and bringing it up. The rest are just, yeah, it's like, do you want this or that? Yeah, right. So that's the thing. If it's not directly connected, so if it's not like, oh, we heard these guys are getting paid this much in terms of more, and we think they're worse than us, oh, we're gonna have to ask for more money. But if, you know, they hear some tier 3 team out there is getting paid like 3K, and they think they should get paid like 7K because they're that good, right? Like they're better than what they're getting
Yes.
paid for. You're gonna hear a comment like, oh, that sucks, but that's gonna be the end of it. Like no one's gonna, like, you know, like publicly bring something up or go to those play. Like maybe if players are good friends, right? If you are a friend with someone from that team, you're gonna say, hey man, I think you guys are getting like fucked. You should ask for more money, or something along those lines. But yeah, if they don't have a direct, I don't think like they really care. I don't think anyone, like, you know, from my former team cared when Chaos got like dropped on where they were like thinking, they were like, yeah, like
At least they didn't us.
no, maybe yeah, more money for us. Yeah.
No, I mean, I know when all that chaos thing was going around, when the chaos team was trying to find an org, I know my players cared. It's just, again, it comes down to what can they actually do to change the situation. Like, it's not like they have contacts to some organization to, like, you know, go get these guys a new team that they can sign on with. So, I mean, I'm not going to put any words in my players' mouth, but I know also I think there's a connection probably between. Not just a matter of caring, but like there's got to be a threshold of like how much work it takes to like solve an issue. Like we have to. I think there's also a world where, again, I'm going to use my team as an example, but I haven't spoken to my players about this, so I don't really necessarily know that their full feelings on this specific kind of a situation. But you know, we're in Europe boot camping and playing at 3 events for the next 6 weeks, and then we get to go home for like 10 days, and then we have to come back for like a month. So in the span of those 3 months where we're gone for 10 of 12 weeks. Like, I don't know how much attention would a player want to devote to those kinds of issues outside of the 10 to 12 hours a day of boot camping and matches and preparing. And then you finally get some time at home to see friends and family, or you have to quarantine. But how, like, you know, I know as a caster, when I'm doing 250 to 300 days of travel each year that I'm away from home, as the year goes on and I get more and more exhausted from such a hectic schedule, I care less and less about, you know, people coming
Other
to me.
people.
Yeah. Like,
Of course.
But that's fine.
I don't have time to dedicate anything to whatever you want to solve. Like, I don't know how else to say to you. Like, this is like, I would have loved to have been involved in some of the tier 2 esports stuff back in North America. I've been saying it's a problem for years that we need to change the way it's done. But when I go home for the first time in 2 months, you know, and I'm only home for 2 weeks, I give fuck all about it. I want to see my girlfriend. I want to see my family. I want to hang out with my dog. I want to do whatever the fuck it is that has nothing to do with tier 2 Counter-Strike, which I just cannot devote energy to. So
I can't believe the dog was in the third place.
I know.
think
I know.
Matt would be disappointed.
Well, listen, my girlfriend watches the VOD. That might have been an issue. So,
All right, there we
But I
go.
think it's also a matter of, like, in anything else, right? Like, it's not up to you, if you're a tier 1 player or a tier 1 team or coach or whatever, to solve their problem for them. They need to come up to you and ask you about some, right? Like, just like for talent, right? Like, you come in and you're new and you're like, how much am I supposed to ask for in terms of payment, right? Like, and then someone who's more experienced tells you, right? And it's just a matter of being fair. I read this was a good interview with I think Vitality CEO or something, where, you know, when they first signed Zywo, he asked for something like, yeah, 1,000 or 2,000 euros per month is fine for me or something.
Sure.
And they paid him like more because, you know, that wouldn't be fair, even though, you know, of course they would get off cheap for an amazing talent, but, you know, that's not what it's all about, right? You want to be fair. And that's something we did with Brocky too, as
Well,
far
also,
as
you know
I
how much
know, at the
loyalty
beginning,
that
right?
Bobby got.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, you're just unknown, you're very young, you have like a trial sort of a contract, you prove yourself, you get on the same page. I don't think that's, exploiting anyone. I think that's fair. The problem is, if you end up paying him like 4 times less than any other player or 5 times less when he's like up there with everyone else. Obviously, you have
Yes.
things, it's not all about performance on the server, brand value, right? The following, that all comes into it as well, as I'm sure like Jason is well aware now with Fallen and all of that stuff. But if someone is a huge brand, he's gonna get paid more as well because he attracts people to the org and everything else.
By the way, I'm just going to do one of the weirdest call-outs of all time. Since Moses referenced that his girlfriend sometimes watches the VOD, you saw the tweet I did, Moses. I think I was doing you a favour, mate. Because one thing Moses' girlfriend does is, cause from the casting world, we all make fun of each other, rib each other. Here's the thing, though. We do technically have some rules, believe it or not, in green rooms. Like, for example, my phone, if I ever go through the cloud of all the old photos, I have pictures of everyone in this call just sleeping on couches. But I don't tweet them. That's the thing. I just use them for, like, the chat, like the WhatsApp group we have or whatever. When your girlfriend tweeted that embarrassing picture of you, I was like, what happened to keep it in the locker room? What the hell is this? Like, why, there's a boundary here. Come on, there's a boundary here. Let's get approval before we put some pictures out. Let's just get some sign-offs. That's all I'm saying. Especially for Jason, for fuck's sake, because there's too many embarrassing pictures that exist of him.
You want to hear a funny story, Duncan? I don't know if you remember this. It was 2016, right? One of the first events of the year, and I was like still fairly new at the time, right? So you all know like Matt and Sadokis and how he gets sometimes. So like we had this like misunderstanding that we had to iron out.
Okay.
Where he was just constantly making, you guys know this, like this part of the world, you don't make jokes about people's moms, girlfriends,
of course, yes.
sisters. Like it can get really heated with that stuff.
Which was his go-to humor, by the way, if people don't know. That was like his default way of making jokes on it.
So he was like doing this, like probably unaware of it. So I was like trying, first like in a nice way, like it was like, yeah, it's just banter. So then now we're gonna like drum roll. So I made the similar joke about his dog.
Oh shit! Okay.
So then it was like things got. So I was like, okay, let's just make a deal right here.
A truce.
Like, I'll stay away from the dog. You stay away from females, right? Or my family.
Yes.
And like we can call it a truce. He was like, yeah, that's fair, and that's how we ironed it out. So
okay. Right, one last topic I thought we could hit before we leave is Yanko actually, I notice, is in a very unusual position, which is that a lot of people, for some reason, by the way, because coaches, you view them as like, right, they're almost part of the team, like, well, I mean, they literally are, but I mean, not like the starting lineup. They're more closer to the players than they are the org, and, they've got to like have those players on side, and so they probably like think similar things or agree with the sentiments. I noticed, Yanko, you've actually been fairly vocal with like, when there's been things to rightfully criticize CSPPA, but you've been pretty vocal of criticizing them, of replying to my tweets or saying things. Now, where do you come down on that whole issue? Because obviously, like the big problem with CSPPA is this, and nobody ever brings this up on talk shows except me. It's like a lot of things that at the moment are like, let's just say movements or charities. The principle that overtly they claim, like we're going to represent players and make sure it's fair. Yeah, obviously everyone agrees with that. Like obviously I want that. Obviously even, by the way, there's even org owners who in theory want like, yes, they want like proper conditions and things to be, but the problem is like, how does it work in practice? What actually happens when you do your ideas? So what would you say? What is your take on CSPPA? Because again, I thought maybe you just wouldn't say anything because you don't want some of the players involved to be pissed or something. So where do you come down on that stuff?
No, well, in general, I don't believe like that people are too malicious in general. So I, for example, don't believe that CSPPA is there like the people who started it, or they're just to exploit the players completely or do something like that. But I do believe along the lines, maybe some things get lost a little bit, down the road, or maybe there is one person there or someone who is trying, to take advantage of it for himself. I think a lot of times it's just a new thing, and obviously CSPPA is about the players, but the players know fuck all about anything life related, right? Let alone business related, or most of them at least, right? So how are they going to make any proper informed decisions, on their own? So then the players would need to probably hire the players on the board, for example, like hire lawyers from the side to go over the things that the lawyers from CSPPA or people involved in CSPPA bring. So their own lawyers could say, hey, this is actually how it really is. This is all fine and good. Like you can just roll with it. Or they say, well, actually, these guys have put in some things differently, which, is not the norm in other similar contracts of the kind or agreements or whatever. I didn't follow everything, but there was things about, player rights, image rights, or representation, like agency-wise and everything like that. That did seem a bit, like not something that's normal in other associations or other player unions of the kind. So, yeah, I think in general it's a good thing to have a platform for the players to sort things out. But I also think, you can't abuse that power just because you can, go on a strike or have all the players come together when you're just dissatisfied with something. It's not to your liking, right? Like there's a thin line between arguing for better conditions or better something and straight up blackmailing.
Do you think the strike was over the line? Is that your take?
I think the blast thing, if that's what you're referencing,
Yes.
I think that was more like blackmail in my mind than it was. I think it was over the line because also I think I also talked about it somewhere. It's like it's probably a case of most of the players not being informed or not listening to what their org was telling them when they were negotiating the agreement, because the org negotiates with the club, the team negotiates with the tournament organizer, and then they just inform the players. They set them like the rule book or whatever, and this is like the things you need to follow. And sometimes they even depends on the org, like they send it to the players first to say if there's anything they want to bring up that they dislike, and if they okay it, then the club signs it with the tournament organizer, right? So it might have been just, they didn't see it the first time around, then when it was actually being implemented, they were like, oh, what the fuck is this? Like, we don't want this. Well, yeah, you okayed it like a week ago, right? So I think that was probably just like miscommunication.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I don't think it was a huge deal, but I understand where they were coming from, at least.
By the way, because obviously that does tie into what you said before as well. Like, even if orgs start telling things to players, like, unless it's basically literally about them, they're probably like tuned out, or in this case, in the online era, they're just doing something on their computer and probably not listening. Here's what I would say here's the way I would explain it to fans who are wondering, like, how extreme is it, right? When big tournaments happen, obviously there's a rule book before all of them. In fact, usually they update the rule book each tournament they have, right? I guarantee you, if you took even a massive tournament, I'm talking like IM Katowice here, if you polled players before the tournament began and asked them, what are the OT rules for this tournament? Dude, unless the OT rules stayed the same as the last ones that they played for that tournament, I bet they would all get it wrong. I bet there'd be like 5 guys, probably all fucking German. They'd know it, but everyone else would be like, same as before, wouldn't it? Like, dude, people don't look this shit up. It's one of the reasons why half the problems in tournaments, when you have pauses and big admin decisions, is just people going and reading the rule book. Like, no one knows what the rules actually are. Like, no one knows what the conditions are.
For me, CSPPA was very straightforward. It's like it exists, so the players can agree on some conditions for tournaments, whether it's tier 1, tier 2, that makes sense, and it's not things like, oh, we want first class tickets everywhere. No, but
yes, exactly.
like certain conditions you agree on, the tournament organizers need to follow if they want to hold a big tournament, right? It's not there to blackmail tournament organizers into doing something that's like getting too ridiculous. And it's also a platform for players to discuss like changes, and if they need to go to Valve about something, like it basically just gives legitimacy to the players as a group in the ecosystem. It's not supposed to be there for CSPPA to negotiate, like, I don't know what, with the tournament organizer in the name of the players, circumventing the teams, right? Like,
yes,
which is a delicate thing, right? The players, the union is there regardless of the club, right? Regardless of the organization they're playing for, because you don't want that to be connected all the time.
Of course.
But also you can't treat it, we're all in this together. That's the whole point at the end of the day, right? Like, one cannot exist without the other. The players, the organizations, the tournament organizers, well, we all need to be in harmony, so to speak, and find a way to work with each other, because it's the only way the scene is like gonna grow and gonna keep going forward, right? Otherwise, if every other tournament players are complaining about something, tournament organizers gonna be like, well, we can't like deliver a stable product now, so this doesn't make sense to us. Our sponsors are starting to complain about this or that. We made an agreement with the sponsor, now we're backing out. It makes us look, irresponsible, and all of this stuff. So, yeah, that's it.
That's all I have to say about that one.
That's all I have to say about that. Jason.
Yeah, you have any thoughts, Moses?
Yeah, what was the original, just a general thoughts on the CSPPA?
I mean, in that case, I was obviously asking Janko specifically because I know he's been out overt about it. But actually, I haven't heard you talk much about it. Obviously, since you've become a coach, you're not in the content side as much. So do you have any brief thoughts about that topic?
I mean, I'll be on. I'll keep it vague, just because
how I like
active as a coach to players on the board and everything. But I mean, I just am always surprised when that was happening at Blast last year. I was surprised at how many like random people on Twitter who are like, they are like personalities. I'm just surprised at how many people seem to like feel like they have like intimate knowledge of the people involved on the business side of the CSPPA. Like how many people are calling them out? Like I honestly don't know a whole lot about CSPP. I don't know the people behind it. I've never met them. I've never spoken to them. I've never spoken to anyone in charge of it. But I do think the big problem with it is, as Yanko said, generally I think players on a whole don't have enough interest in being involved with things like that. I don't know if they have the right people in the leadership positions to represent the players properly. And just from the start of the CSPPA. I remember thinking, like, I remember talking to players at the time it began, and there was still a lot of mistrust and like a lot of hesitance for players to like fully buy into it and then believe that it was going to be on their side. And I always felt like CSPPA just like missed a window of opportunity when I felt like they should have taken some kind of a fight like really, really early on when they announced some kind of early fight to just establish themselves and make it like the right fight, to show that you're there to actually fight for the players and actually be able to build some trust within the player base that has signed up to be part of the CSPPA. And I just, for the longest time, not seeing them do much over issues that I thought were pretty egregious that warranted something. I think they just missed a window of opportunity to be as effective as they would have liked. And now it's like a really uphill task for them to repair that trust and see if they can actually build it properly. And I don't know, again, like I said, I don't know much about the CSPPA as an organization, so I don't know what they're doing right now, but it seems to me like they just, now it's just like weird. Like, I don't know what they're going to do in the future.
The big one was like, it wasn't the big one that people always reference was the Mountain Dew League 1 and Pro League, right? Like
EPL slots.
Like you're complaining about like TeamSpeak, and then it's like this thing happened, but it's like obviously things were happening behind the scenes as well. It's not like it just went out like by itself, but that is probably a good example of players getting screwed in favor of the team orgs, right? Like in a sense of you're gonna get like a bigger org, like make them a partner team, even though they don't have a slot in the league. While someone who went through the grueling process of qualifying and everything, well, you guys are just gonna have to wait it out. And it's true for some of these players and teams, like that's what they were banking on. If they get this spot, they can keep going, right? Like if not, they have to like release the team because it's just not worth keeping them on anymore. So yeah, you can definitely look to that. I think it's a fair criticism of the CSPPA not being more vocal, even publicly, even if they were doing some stuff behind the scenes. Like you at least need to let the teams know, like do a bit more there. And I think that's fair to say.
I've just got a couple of things to say on this, brief though. One would be, one of the reasons I actually think this is something a lot of fans probably won't get, because fans will think, because in theory CSPPA essentially exists to battle people like TOs, team organisations. Fans would think naively those organisations and entities must hate the CSPPA, must never want it to exist. It ain't true. Like I've told this story on By the Numbers. When I heard some of the things they did or didn't do early on, basically told Flashpoint, like, I don't think we should work with them. Like, I don't see what the upside is. But they all wanted to work with them, all those teams represented, and the reason why is because what they want like basically to be able to make a real deal that has two sides to it, and that's the key point here. It's like, yes, the players can ask for something, cool, but if the players ask for something from a TO, then the TO can also say to CSPPA, okay, if we give you this, then you have to ensure, for example, players are on time, or they don't complain about things without checking first. Let's have like a back channel or something, which I think, by the way, if it worked, is a great idea, because we all know how many problems actually aren't real problems. They're just miscommunication, or as we've said before, the player doesn't know there's a rule change or there's something different about how this tournament works, but they're on Twitter, and if the player calls you out, the players' fans are going to think you're wrong and they're going to think he's right, and you just get a whole stupid PR mess. The other angle is this, and this is actually, I can't believe more people don't talk about this part, but the most disappointing thing about CSPPA for me isn't even all the agency stuff. It's not that, right? Because that's like minutiae of like this year, last year. It's the grander picture that they don't seem to have any interest in actually having like community representation. And what I mean by that is, when I heard like Scoots is involved as an advisor, back in the day when originally it was going to be nothing, and obviously people like Sean Gez, when I heard these people are involved, I thought brilliant, because guess what? I'd love to do talk shows like this where the third box, obviously not for this episode, but like the third box for next episode would be like Scoots, and we'd be like, so what is going on with like the protest? Like, why did that happen? And these are people we know. So it's not like we're meeting some, corporate drone that's like, who the fuck's this guy? It's because it's people we know. We'd get a sense of what they're working for, and they could hint at things they're doing or give like a sentiment. But for some weird reason, this is why I do unfortunately have a lot of distrust towards them as an org, is when I think of unions in other sports, dude, those guys love the media, because the media, like I say, is how you get your messaging out to the fans, how you explain stuff. These people seem to be like overtly hostile to media. Like, I've never seen them do it. I've even heard of other podcasts that like had someone lined up and then they cancel last minute. I've never seen them anywhere on anything. Like, have they ever been on HLTV Confirmed? Have they been anywhere? I don't think I've ever seen any of them actually appear, especially once the dramas began, and just talk about it. Like, listen, you don't have to tell us private stuff, of course, but do it like I say, like a community person. Just give us like a sense of what's going on, or put a human face to what's going on. If you do that, I'm not joking, the exact same things could have happened, but the community reaction would have been very different, in my opinion.
Like I said, I actually agree with you, because I don't know anything about the CSPPA. I don't know like what their messaging is or what they're trying to do. I agree entirely. I actually think it's pretty egregious that anyone involved in the CSPPA let Chris J be so public on Twitter when all that was going down.
Oh, they let him wreck himself, didn't they?
I cannot believe they let him just go out there and effectively just shoot himself in the foot over and over again. Like, I even feel bad for Chris that he had to do that. How did no one from the CSPPA like take ownership and responsibility and say, listen, we can handle the social media stuff? Like,
yeah, it should be someone else doing that, right? Yeah.
It should protect the player.
Yes.
Why are you letting a player go out on Twitter like that and just destroy himself? That was the weirdest part about the whole thing.
That was a bit of note for sure.
I think from the outside, it just seems a little bit, the player union is like, there's these collective bargaining agreements, like the NBA, the NFL, all these big leagues, right? You're discussing everything, and there's potential lockout seasons, right, when you don't agree and stuff. And I think some of the people within the CSPPA could potentially, be 5 steps ahead of themselves in that sense. They're, looking at all these things that, these already established leagues, sports, unions do, and they're like, oh, we should start doing something along those lines, but we're not even there yet.
Yes.
as an ecosystem as a whole, as an esport, and all of that stuff. So I think just, don't get too ahead of yourselves. Like, the main thing is so the players don't get screwed over. All players, right? Like tier 2, tier 3, in these minor leagues, and that should be your main concern, and not like, getting players more money to participate in a tournament, like a 3K stipend for participating in this tournament. That's not going to be for a tier 1 tournament and tier 1 players. That's not going to be anything for them. Like, if you can find that for a tier 3 team, then great, that's going to be awesome for them. But that's not what it should be about right now, in my opinion.
I think honestly also you have to look at it, and I also, one thing I thought when they started things up is I thought they just got too big too fast. Like, didn't they sign something mental, like 80 Counter-Strike teams or something? They have so many of like technically members, and it felt like when this is starting, it's like you're biting off more than you can chew. Like, start with like the top 10 teams. Yeah. That's going to be hard enough to get 50 players to all agree on one thing or on something like that. And then add in the next 5 and then do it in phases. But when you started, you have, the top 10 teams, and then you also have teams, 30 through 40. They have completely different interests in how the scene is run. There's no way
that's the problem.
Actually reconcile.
That's the problem in itself, right? You can't do that, because then people would say, well, you're just arguing for what's best for you guys, the top 10 teams, right? So in a way, you are forced to include them all, so everyone can have a say. So you're not just, grooming the scene, so it's like top heavy, right? So that's a kind of
But I think it goes back to also the messaging thing with Duncan. I think that can be handled by like good good media and good PR and just say, listen, we want to get all these teams involved, but this is something that's never been created before in esports. And if we get too big too fast and we don't establish the foundation, then we can't operate correctly. So we're going to start with these 10 teams and we're going to grow it as fast and as responsible and as fast as possible. But, you know, we have to be able to get a foundation going before we can expand to do good things for all the community. Because I mean, there's just too much going on if you try and incorporate that all at once, in my opinion.
This video was kindly supported by Lagger15, Pronogo, Andrew, Dean Tanglis, Animosity, ErikHillestad, Andreas Kroknes, Hades, Jensen Goh, Zoomba, JDubs, Tobias Bernasconi, Alexander Rao, and as always, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Want to ask a question in one of my monthly video AMAs? Do you want teasers? See who's going to be on my next interviews and shows? Maybe you want to take part in a discussion with me where we go anywhere. We had a mad one talking about chess the other month. If so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today at the link in the description box below.